And then I'll come back over and we're going to talk about our program, the Regional Conservation Partnership Program that operates within the framework of the Sentinel landscape. We'll talk about specific project goals. We'll get kind of in the actual details, but not too much with the time we have, talking about the practices that we're offering. And then we'll conclude on how to apply to this wonderful program. And then we'll offer up for any questions. All right, Mr. Daniel.
Right. Thanks, George. Good afternoon, everybody. Again, I'm Daniel Oppenheimer, Land Program Director with the Hill Country Alliance. Excited to spend a few minutes talking with y'all about this locally led partnership working at the intersection of agricultural productivity, natural resources conservation, and military readiness. George, let's hop to the next slide, please. So what is a Sentinel Landscape Partnership? That's not a term you hear in Texas very often, and it's a pretty new thing for us. The Sentinel Landscape Partnership was created back in 2013 based on a simple but important realization that what happens outside a military installation in terms of, things that are off base, outside the fence lines, can impact what happens on base in terms of military training and readiness. And so again, back in 2013, the U.S. Department of Agriculture got together with the U.S. Department of Defense and the U.S. Department of the Interior to create this national program that supports military readiness by working with volunteering private landowners and local communities off base, outside the fence lines, on natural resource issues that not only align with local goals, but in so doing support military readiness. What does that mean? What does that look like? We don't typically connect the dots in Texas when we talk about agriculture. We usually don't bring the military into the same sentence. So what does that mean? What does that look like? Well, there are some types of land uses like agriculture that are considered compatible land uses. That means they do not impede military training or military readiness. And since they don't encroach on or impede on the training mission, they're considered compatible and support military readiness. So to give a very simple example, here in the Texas Hill Country around Joint Base San Antonio's Camp Bullis, especially on the north side, a cow does not impede nighttime training. We can go back to the other slide for just a sec, George.
Okay.
A cow does not impede nighttime training by creating a bunch of light pollution, nor does a cow create a big, tall vertical obstruction to impede the use of a combat assault landing strip or other flight training missions, nor does a cow complain about the noise from a shooting range. And so for those very reasons, we would consider things like agriculture and open spaces compatible land uses that support the training mission. And so this broad Sentinel Landscape Partnership, again, it's a nationwide program and it's non-regulatory. Our work as a partnership is focused on connecting landowners and communities around Joint Base San Antonio with technical and financial resources that align with those local needs and goals, and in so doing, support those compatible land uses. So the Camp Bullis Sentinel Landscape Partnership, we were officially recognized as a Sentinel Landscape back in 2022, so almost 3 years ago. And it's a really competitive process to be recognized as a Sentinel Landscape. And I just want to outline a few of the benefits. Why go through this competitive process? Well, there's a few reasons, and they're pretty compelling. The first is that when you are officially recognized as a Sentinel Landscape Partnership, partnerships are given priority consideration for not all, but some federal funds. And you're going to hear today about one of those remarkable opportunities that our partnership secured to support private landowners. We're also able to match some federal dollars with other federal dollars. And so oftentimes when you try to bring in say $100 of federal funding, a lot of these grants or funding programs want to see you bringing your own funding, putting your own skin in the game. So they'll say, we'll give you $100 if you can demonstrate that you're putting in your own additional $100. And so typically you can't use federal funding as match for other federal funds, but through this program, we have some flexibility there. And then one of the other compelling benefits is that each of these partnerships, and again, there's about now 17 or 18 across the country, gets multiple years of funding to support a partnership coordinator, which is to say the lead herder of cats, and I am the coordinator of the Camp Bullis Sentinel Landscape Partnership. George, let's go to the next slide, please. So when we talk about Joint Base San Antonio, Camp Bullis was created in the early 1900s north of San Antonio, and at the time, it was way out in the boonies. Camp Bullis provides a really diverse set of training opportunities and support, including for all DoD medical training, along with pre-deployment, special forces, and other national training missions. And in recent decades, I suspect we all have seen this, we've seen tremendous growth in the Texas Hill Country. Some of that growth has been incompatible and started to impede military readiness at Joint Base San Antonio's Camp Bullis. We're seeing greater light pollution, which impedes nighttime training. Upstream on creeks like Cibolo Creek, we're seeing a lot more impervious cover. And because we live in Flash Flood Alley, not only are our rural and urban communities susceptible to flash flooding, but so too is Camp Bullis. Camp Bullis has seen really adverse impacts from past floods that have interrupted training missions for days and even weeks. Infrastructure has been wiped out, and 2 people have been killed on base in recent years because of flash flooding. And so again, these things that we typically think about, in terms of our rural and urban communities, our military community is susceptible to some of these things as well. And just like we all rely on the Edwards and Trinity aquifers for drinking water and other uses, so too does Joint Base San Antonio rely on the groundwater for drinking and other uses. And so on the flip side, we know that private land stewardship, when we take care of the land, that not only benefits the private landowner, we know that good private land stewardship has rippling benefits outside of a given farm or ranch. We know that it can enhance soil health, sustaining agricultural productivity, and really enhancing groundwater infiltration, which supports our regional resilience to drought and flash flooding. And so George and Erin are going to talk about a really amazing opportunity, this funding that can support good private land stewardship in the Camp Bullis Sentinel landscape, which you can see delineated with those purple lines. And just excited to be here. Thanks everybody for joining. George and Erin, take it away.
Great. Thank you, Daniel. We really feel honored being the Natural Resources Institute and lead partner on this program to be part of this first ever in Texas Sentinel landscape. That is really truly an honor. And, and we appreciate Daniel was talking about, preserving military readiness and what's specific for our particular program and our particular project area. So we're excited to kind of be talking about what we can do to help with those issues inside the fence, as well as with the landowners and ecological concerns and land stewards outside the fence. So this is our program, a regional conservation partnership program, a partner-driven approach to conservation that funds solutions to natural resources challenges. Now, I'll kind of give you the layman terms that when I worked in the field office during that time, we, as an NRCS, field person, we heard about this program, and we understand the benefits of a regional conservation program because we would work in certain districts with landowners within our fabric of the organization throughout the state and the nation. But we might only be working in one county, and there might be other leadership in the next door county. So when we're talking about land fragmentation, wildlife fragmentation, larger ecological concerns, hydrology being a big part of that, we have to look at the larger scale and not just the scale that we're working at in the field office. So we always thought it was a great idea, but now I actually get to be part of one. And so the Regional Conservation Partnership Program is a larger, in our case, a watershed-based approach. And we're going to talk more about our project area. But that's one of the advantages right there. We get to address larger scale. The other part that we get to work with is a collective resources and collaboration on common goals. I mean, we're really excited to be working with Daniel and his enormous fabric. It's just a wonderful quilt of all of the landowners, of all the associations, of all the agencies, and then their sister organizations. They're all really working for these common goals within the Hill Country. And this is one of the benefit of this job, is that we're all really on the same team. And so we're kind of excited about that. Now, RCP projects are actually implemented by using NRCS or USDA dollars, the Natural Resource Conservation Service. So we're working in conjunction with our partners with the NRCS. We're working with the local field offices, the team leaders, the field agents as well. But A&M, the Natural Resources Institute, we're actually the lead partner. Now, again, we're going to need the help from our collaborators. We're going to work with the NRCS. But what I want the audience to kind of understand too is that this is not just another government program. This is not EQIP that you might have applied for in the local NRCS office. It's bigger, it's grander, but some of the elements of the process will be similar to what you're used to if you've worked with the NRCS. We're thankful to our partners. We have 10 partners actually on our agreement, with Texas A&M NRI being the lead partner. But we have Joint Base San Antonio, we have the Nature Conservancy, Texas Agricultural Land Trust, Green Spaces Alliance, Hill Country Alliance, Cibolo Oak Conservancy, the Edwards Aquifer Authority, Greater Edwards Aquifer Alliance, and the Trinity Glen Rose Groundwater Conservation District. Now, even though these are actually identified in our project agreement, we have so many more partners than this. We have so many partners that we're working with you. I mean, some of our audience right now, well, we also consider you partners for this project. So our project area consists of 7 counties. 2 of the counties are more incidental, Kerr and Blanco. Again, it was a watershed-based approach, but you can see the pattern or the footprint of Camp Bullis. But we are working with mostly the Comal, Kendall, Bexar, Bandera, and Medina counties, as you can see. Now we had, there's 2 parts actually of our program. We're not going to talk about the first part, which we're really excited about and we're already implementing. It's our conservation easement program. So the money that we received for this project was to go to conservation easements to protect that north border, and adjacent areas got priority to Camp Bullis to address those issues that Daniel covered in his slide, but also the ecological concerns. That project is underway right now. We're super excited about that. There'll be more information and press releases as we move on. But this is a second component of our project, which is the land management. And we're going to talk about the funding and the brass tacks of it toward the end. But I wanted us to kind of get more of a larger scope. Let's back up on the empty canvas here and actually talk about diagrammatically, what are we actually doing here? So the process, instead of just immediately throwing out government language that Erin Davis would have to decipher in the chat, like, what does that acronym mean? I'm trying to kind of describe it in a process that I would understand if I was a land steward. And we do appreciate, our audience here, because we have, land stewards, within this that have actually logged in online and that are part of this process as well. So the process overall that we talk about, I like to start with this, reading the land. Over 20 years ago, when I started in the field office in San Angelo, I remember running across a publication by this person that you may know, Steve Nelly, who was also working in that San Angelo office. And he came up with this publication called Reading the Land. And it was really a very instrumental publication for me as a young rangeland management specialist starting out to understand the art and science of really what we're doing before we even talk about government programs and bureaucracy and conservation planning. Really, what are we talking about here? And we're talking about reading the land. You know, in 1955, famous prairie ecologist John Ernst Weaver wrote the words, "Nature is an open book for those who care to read." And that's exactly what we're doing here. And the resources that were available to Mr. Weaver are so much more supplemented now by what we know now. Being able to read the land from a technical specialist, which again, I really enjoy working with NRI because we're a science-based organization, but we're also about getting that science applied on the ground. As our leader talks about, Roel Lopez, let's get some hides on the wall. And that's what this program is allowing us to do. So we have the technical expertise to be able to go out there to observe the land based on the available science on what we had. The primary language, you know, of this land is the plant life, but it's also about understanding terrain and contours and soils and climate and ecohydrology and geology and more. It also involves getting out of the pickup truck and actually walking the land and actually seeing, again, on the scale of the actual underneath your boots, so to speak. What are you actually looking at? What are you actually observing here? This has been the exciting part, but you can't just describe this with science. We also have the land stewards, yourselves, that have grew up on this land, that have become part of this land, that know this land intimately. I share that because I had property in the hill country. I worked the land in the hill country. A big part of my heart is still in the hill country. So I understand that. I understand. And so does Erin. We're both field personnel. Erin comes from the Forest Service as a field personnel. I come from the NRCS as a field personnel. So we understand the land, but actually we learn a lot from you, the land stewards, about your land. We love walking with you and talking about what you've experienced on this land and what you've actually what your goals are on this land. This by far is one of the best parts of our job, sitting across the dining table with a cup of coffee with, you know, the ranch owner and actually talking about your land and seeing that passion, seeing the enthusiasm is an exciting part for us. So we're still doing that. I don't want to immediately rush into like, here's an application, here's how to sign. I want you to understand the passion that we have as the lead partner in this organization, the passion that Erin and I both have to do some good together out here. So when we talk about reading the land, when we talk about your land steward goals, we put that together in a written document called a conservation plan. The conservation plan, if you've worked with the NRCS before, you've heard that term. If you haven't worked with them before, great, because this is really going to be kind of a clean slate. But we need a way to document the decisions, what you would like to do as a land steward on this land. Part of that conservation plan also identifies resource concerns. We're going to have a slide here that talks about our resource concerns. These are the ecological natural resources concerns of not only of your particular land, but of our nation. This is the soil, the water, the air, the plants, the animals, the cultural resource, the human resource. We need to look at that as well, and that works in a holistic approach. What we do to implement solutions, part of this conservation plan, is through practices. Practices are the method to implement solutions to this holistic conservation plan. We have created practices specific for the hill country, specific for the objectives of Joint Base San Antonio and Camp Bullis and the neighbors in the 1 million acres or outside of those fences. To work together to focus our energy, to focus our funding on this plan and on these practices. Our ecological resource concerns for this particular plan and for our project, and this is getting a little into the Forbes, so to speak, but we've got stated resource concerns according to our contract that we have to meet these resource concerns. But these weren't just taken arbitrarily. These were discussed. It took a year to really get this program off the ground, and I thank our forefathers for developing this. But these are the things that are stated in our agreement that we're addressing, but they're things that everyone agrees that we should be looking at. And I'm going to go in more detail about each of these. Again, we've got a lot to cover, so I'm trying not to get too much into it. But the aquatic habitat is just the fancy word on the resource concern that we are specifically targeting riparian areas to improve groundwater recharge, maintain water quality and quantity both on site and in the watershed. This hopefully will address some of the issues that Daniel had talked about with flooding. We know we're just biting just the little piece off the fabric here, and there's so much of a grander solution than just what we're doing, but we're part of it. And I realized just working in the field, and Steve Nelly was my mentor, just as he was for many of you, is that we've just been on countless places just determining and evaluating riparian areas. And that was in a climate that got about 11 inches of rain per year. So those were just wonderful oases of Eden, Garden of Edens that we would see out in the semi-arid climate of San Angelo. Well, those are still important here. Those are still important in the hill country, if not even more important, because the hill country is a complex ecosystem, even more complex than the North Prairies, and that is, it's a wonderful ecosystem. So understanding the riparian areas, I think really we can do our best with the time we have, with the money we have. We're going to address that resource concern. The next resource concern, degraded plant condition. Again, when we're talking about reading the land, the language, the primary language of the land is plant life. Understanding historically what was there, understanding transition models of what could it be now, not necessarily going back to climax vegetation and Dykstra House, which has its purpose as well. But what are we doing to, again, meet the land steward goals? And after reading the land and addressing this resource concern, what can we do? We're excited about this too, because I can honestly understand, speaking just from being in this business a while, it just seems that anytime we've ever introduced a plant that is not part of our native system, it's come back and bit us in the rear. We have many examples of that. Couldn't say that necessarily when I was with USDA, but I could see it, I could witness that. So when we're going to be talking about our practices, we're going to be talking about native. We're talking about native, holistic, what really belongs there, and that's what we want to restore. The next part is the soil quality limitations. Being in the hill country, I think some of you may have heard this, is that, it takes 1,000 years to make 1 inch of soil. And it's really easy to lose it on these really shallow soil sites, especially on our hill slopes and our low stony hill and our some of those range sites. It's really important that we're going to do something about that, as well as our prairie sites. Terrestrial habitat, we're talking about that connectivity of food, cover, space, shelter, water for wildlife. So again, here we're hitting both the riparian areas or the lowlands and the terrestrial habitat and the uplands. So really just based on these resource concerns, which is really how the government funding works too. But it's exactly what we need as well in layman's terms on our project and on our land. So each of the applications that we take must address at least one of these resource concerns. And again, you may have a lot of questions about this, and that's more than the format we can offer right now, but this is where we're going to help when we actually meet with the landowners. We don't expect them to know any of this. We're going to actually be able to sit and describe this in more detail. So some of the eligible practices, and these are the ones that we've targeted for our project for this RCPP, and these are actual practices that are listed and delineated USDA terms, and I'll kind of break them down, but we kind of know what these are. But we still, at the end of the day, we still have to follow their certification as far as to their technical adequacy as well. So we're talking about riparian forest buffers, which includes herbaceous cover and the tree shrub establishment in those areas. Conservation cover, we'll talk a little bit about that. Brush management, which is the term many of you know. Prescribed grazing, many of you know. Range planting, upland wildlife habitat management, and early successional habitat management. And again, we could spend a long time on here, but I'll just kind of hit the highlights. So these are the eligible practices. For someone to be applying for our program, they have to meet at least one resource concern. And if they meet more than one, they're going to get higher ranking in our rubric that we're using, because we want to do the most good with the money that we have and the time that we have. So those that are addressing more resource concerns by utilizing these practices will be higher ranked in the program. The facilitating practices are ones that are subsidiary. They have to assist a primary practice. In other words, someone can't come to us like you could with the NRCS. You could just go to your local NRCS office and apply for a fence. You can't do that with us. That fence has to be part of a primary practice. Let's say it's the riparian forest buffer, and we've decided as part of our conservation plan that we are going to fence off both sides of that buffer and actually make it a manageable land unit. Then we will help pay for that fence. But it's not just an arbitrary, one-shot rodeo kind of a deal. These facilitating practices all are meant to assist primary practices. So, and we can get more in that detail later on. Oop, wrong way. Okay, riparian forest buffer and riparian herbaceous cover. So again, we're just kind of summing this up. Right? A forest buffer is creating a designated area that's predominantly covered by trees and shrubs located adjacent to an upslope from a waterway. Herbaceous cover is just like it sounds. That's the herbaceous cover that helps these riparian systems to maintain ecological function, or what we used to say proper functioning condition, which doesn't seem to be a term used anymore. Benefits: stabilizing stream bank, filtering pollutants, improving water quality, providing shade to the river for aquatic species. The riparian forest buffer is our primary practice. Riparian herbaceous covers our primary practice, but we may use fence to help facilitate that practice. We might need to get some of the plant species that are not native, but that are actually causing harm in those areas, and we can address those as well. Not crazy about this slide particular, but it just kind of gets you the updated. We'll find a much better one here, but I'm glad we just put it in just to kind of describe that what we're doing with these riparian buffers, it's really science-based. There's a lot to these things, and I may be preaching to the choir. I know among the audience we have several published authors, we have land stewards, we have land managers, we have ranch owners. So this isn't a new concept to many of you, but you can just kind of see how excited I get about it. Speaking of the buffers as well, again, restoring based on the ecological site condition, what are some of the woodies that would help in these riparian areas? Do we need to reestablish them, or would natural regeneration occur if we just manage it specifically as a land unit? So conservation cover, this is areas that we're actually doing a planting to improve other benefits. It could be for pollinators, pollinator habitat, for wildlife. This is not a practice that's used for forage production or crops per se, but it's more specific in going ahead and overseeding or overplanting in an area with existing vegetation for this purpose. We're going to be doing an in-person workshop at the Nature Conservancy, and correct me how to say that correctly, Erin, but we're going to be doing that here coming up soon in Bernie, I think at the end of March. Is that right? And we'll give you, we're going to have
Cibolo Center for Conservation. Yep.
That's it. Okay, thank you. You would think I could get past RCPP. I could handle other acronyms. So we'll be doing it in person. We're going to have Steve Nelly actually presenting about riparian systems there. We're going to have Tim Sigmund, who is with I think Texas Parks. We did a lot of rangeland prairie restoration projects together, and he's going to talk a little bit about what grass seed mixes will actually work that he's experienced and had great success from. So we are bringing in some of the subject matter experts on this as well. Brush management, you've definitely, just about everyone in the Hill Country has probably heard of this, but what we're really being careful to articulate is that this again is based on what is the restoration for that particular site. So we're really looking at secondary regrowth. We're going to have, if we're looking at a field that has secondary regrowth cedar and that has pretty much a monoculture of KR blue stem, well, we can do something about that. We can get that secondary regrowth out. we can actually work to take out the KR blue stem and plant it to a native mix and have facility management to go, or prescribed grazing management to go along with its success in its establishment. So we're talking about hill slopes. We're talking different too. This isn't just a clear slate, clear all the cedar kind of program. We're going to be careful not to plant cedar on slopes over 12%, and selectively within 100 feet of the named waterways. There's a whole big topic on this, when we talk about cedar in the hill country and that. But again, we're talking holistic. We're talking a balanced approach to this. Prescribed grazing is really important. This is kind of as a rangeland management specialist, as my background, this was what we felt was the most important part, because we can do great things on the land, but if it's not followed up with management and proper management, then you're really not going to recognize the gains for very long before they return to what they were before we even got there. So we can talk about prescribed grazing. We have some really great prescribed grazing specialists. Some of these, depending on the cost share, depending on the county, they'll pay for deferment. I like to say that this project is not a calculator. This project doesn't mean we don't want any livestock. This project means that the livestock, as well as the wildlife, as well as the pollinators, as well as whatever the objectives of the landowner, are part of that holistic approach. So prescribed grazing involves livestock, but it involves really the grazers and the browsers out there as well. Range planning, we're kind of excited about this. And this is where Tim is going to come in. If we can take some of these sites and actually restore them to their prairie site condition, to their ecological site description, we're really excited about this. We know range planning takes a while. I mean, the term we used in the industry was the first year it sleeps, the second year it creeps, and the third year it reaps. So we know that's a commitment to time for the landowners. But again, understanding and coming back from experience with this, we hope that your customers know they're in good hands with this. Upland wildlife habitat management. Again, we talked about livestock, but we're talking about wildlife habitat here as well. What we can do to improve shelter, cover, food in the proper amounts for this habitat development. Early successional habitat development is another practice. This is already used by some of the NRCS field offices, but you can just think about this is creating a disturbance to the soil, to creating a disturbance to the surface of the land, to create a predictable result in the change in the ecological community. We're going to look at specific range sites and see if this would apply. I know out west this was done often because we could run a disc plow over the top, just a couple inches, an offset disc, just to encourage seed source for quail, for dove. I mean, it was just really kind of nice to do that. We'll see what the specific objectives are depending where we are in the hill country. Okay, I know I covered a lot with that, and we are going to have some question and answers coming up. I think we're still doing pretty good in time. I've got 5 more minutes. Excellent. Okay, I think I'm using the 5 minutes from Daniel that finished early. All right, so the land management is open. January 7th, 2025, we are accepting applications. We noticed some of our audience or some of the customers who have already applied on our website. My apologies that we have not contacted you yet. We will. We had to get past a few of these things, and we've been working on this outreach as part of our program. But we are going to be contacting you here very soon, and we're going to be talking about you and your land. And we're going to start making appointments where Erin and I can actually meet with you on the land. So thank you for your patience and thank you for applying. And please tell your neighbors as well. So we talked about the requirements. It has to meet at least one resource concern. The landowner is going to need to eventually, if they're going to move forward, they're going to need to get farm records established with a farm service agency, which is what FSA stands for. We have information on our website that Erin's going to be showing you here in a little bit that shows you all these resources. We can help you as well. We're not just saying go take care of it. We can help you. We can meet you there. I mean, we'll be able to help you and assist you through this program to get your farm records up to date. It's usually just paperwork. It's not really a big deal. We'll start then, preparing site visits. We'll start working with you on the conservation plan. And for our people in the NRCS that are part of our audience. I think we have a few NRCS people, and thank you all very much. We appreciate what you do. This is what's different than our program than an EQIP program. That is lead partner, the NRI, and that means Erin and I, are the ones that are actually writing the conservation plan. We're all the ones that are actually making first contact with the landowner. If they're actually come to the NRCS office, wonderful. We appreciate that. But please redirect them to our website. Let them do a contact through our application process. That is really the funnel that we use to make contacts with everyone. That's the spreadsheet we maintain. That's our method of conversation with the state office as well. So we need to be the single point of contact eventually. All of those applications, all those customers need to come to us. Now, it doesn't mean that we might not be calling the NRCS, and we would love to come alongside with them. We feel like we're going to have a great relationship with them, that we can call the field agents and say, hey, do you want to come out with us? We're meeting so-and-so out in the field, and then we can both be there, or Erin can hop in the truck with the NRCS agent or vice versa. So we're hoping to really work cooperatively with the guys. But at the end of the day, we're the ones writing the conservation plan, doing the maps, establishing the practices. Practices must follow the NRCS guidelines and practice standards, and there will be some post-implementation as well. So with that said, I'm going to pass it over to Erin, and Erin's going to show you the website quickly and the application page. Erin, would you like me to stop sharing my screen?
No, go ahead and just keep sharing and click to the next slide, please.
Oh, that's right. You got it on the slide. Excellent. Okay, so that link at the bottom of this slide is the link to our RCPP website.
All right, so when you go to the website, this is what you're going to see. This is the home page, and you will just scroll down a little bit, and you will see, next slide, that you can skip to these things. So the first link there, the land management funding and practices, it mentions all these eligible practices that George went over. So if you want to revisit and read about those, that's where it will be. And then if you want to skip straight to the application, it'll be that second link there. When you click that link, it will take you to a form, which is pretty simple. Your name, if you're entirely within the project area. If you think you're on the edge, just say yes. We're going to look it up and make sure that you're inside the boundary. Third question, name of the property, if it's under a different name than yours. And then the physical address or the coordinates, if it's an address that's difficult to put into Google Maps, if you could put that there, please. The acres of your property, and then the counties that the property is located in. Next slide. You'll provide your FSA, that's your Farm Service Agency number if you have it. If not, it would be great if you could provide your property ID numbers for us to find your property, but that question's not required. So if you're just quickly filling this out, you can skip that. Your phone number, email, of course, the practices that you might be interested in. If you don't know, you can click not sure. And then just a couple other questions. How'd you hear about this program? And if you've worked with NRCS before. And then you just click submit, and we will get all that information and reach out to you. And then next slide. A couple other things. When you're at the home page, if you keep scrolling, you'll see the whole menu of pages. So this is a great site just to look at what Daniel was talking about, the Sentinel Landscape Partnership and what that's about. So this is a hub of information for that, as well as looking at how to establish your Farm Service Agency records. That there's a page for that. And then our last page just has some other general resources and also links to the Land Steward podcast, which is hosted by NRI, Natural Resources Institute. And George and I were recently on an episode to talk about this program. So next slide, there's the URL again, CampBullisRCPP.nri.tamu.edu. And if you want to scan this QR code, just open the camera on your phone. This will take you straight to the application. And we'll pause here, but we'll get back to George.
Okay. Give you a few more minutes, or a few more seconds to get that done. But if you can't get to it now, my understanding is that Erin will be able to share this in the chat perhaps, and we'll move on. Okay, so before we get to the actual questions, and we are actually 4 minutes ahead of schedule, amen. So we're going to take about 10 minutes for questions, but